Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yoda brothers, it's the director. Chargers fans, let's continue our series in evaluating the best available free agents in the 2022 offseason. We've covered wide receiver, tight end, defensive line, cornerback. If you guys want to check out those other positions, links are provided in the description. Now today, we've made our way to running back and offensive line. And honestly, this is a pretty difficult episode of the series for me to evaluate. The free agent pool, as far as quality offensive linemen, running backs, maybe not as good as we've seen in years past, but still, this doesn't change the fact the Chargers are going to be needing a right tackle. We're going to be letting go of Brian Bulaga more than likely, freeing up $11 million in cap space. That's something we're going to have to replace, maybe in free agency. We're going to need a new right guard, depending on what we do with Ode Ibushi. And for the love of all that's holy, we need to get a running back 2 in the room that complements Austin Eckler. We need a bruising back to get there with the Chargers roster. I also think there's a very high chance that these positions are going to be addressed in the draft as well, especially right tackle. So keep that in mind as we're going through this list, okay? It's a very important group, I would say, for the Chargers to get right this offseason without breaking the bank. So let's do it, man. Running backs and offensive line. I think there's some really good value options that you're going to find in this list. So if you're a general NFL fan as well, pay attention. I think we got some solid names to go over in today's video. Now, before we do, a question in the comments for you guys. Would you feel more confident in the Chargers signing a decent, reliable veteran, maybe for a bit of like a mid-tier price to protect Justin Herbert at right tackle, or an unproven rookie with a high ceiling? Again, the best case scenario is a guy like Rashawn Slater, but it doesn't always pan out that way. Keep that in mind. So let me know your guys' opinion on that. Let's get into this one. Before we do, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. Small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, bell notification. Helps me out a lot. Let's get into it, baby. Lights, camera, action. Your 2022 best available free agents at the positions of running back and offensive line for the Chargers. Now, we got to kick this thing off quick, man. We got a lot of names on this list. We're going to go all the way from the bottom, make our way up to number 1. Before we do, honorable mentions, because I got guys, asking about certain names every video. Guys like Brandon Sheriff, Teron Armstead, Orlando Brown Jr., Leonard Fournette. These guys are great talents. I'm not going to lie. I would be super excited if the Chargers signed any of them. But to me, they're likely priced a little bit higher than what I would be willing to pay, and maybe they're not as good of a scheme fit for the Chargers as maybe other players you're going to find on this list. So now we got a lot of names on this list, dude. So let's kick things off at number 17 in honor of Phillip Rivers. When he's going to sign that 1 year or that 1 day contract, man, I'm ready to see that name in the Hall of Fame for the Chargers. Let's start off at number 17 with Ronald Jones. Is it the 3rd or the 2nd? I don't remember. I think it's the 2nd. In terms of what the Chargers are looking for from their running back 2, I think Ronald Jones fits the bill, okay? The Chargers, they've been trying things out with Justin Jackson, Joshua Kelly. In terms of maybe scheme fit and what we need from a running back 2, I don't think those guys really fit the bill, right? I think Ronald Jones sort of does, right? 5'11", 223 pounds. He's a guy that you can call upon in short yardage situations, and that's exactly what the Chargers have been missing. Again, not the flashiest name, but that's not really what we need right now. I think a move like what we saw a couple seasons ago, signing Kellen Ballage, if you guys remember him, like 6'3", huge, like 230 pounds between the tackle guy. That's what I'm looking for in terms of a running back 2 for the Chargers on this list. Ronald Jones averaged about 4.2 yards per carry. He's not like the best name on this list, but he's good enough to mix in there with Austin Eckler on a cheap deal. I'm also not looking to spend a lot of money because I think the Chargers need money in other areas, more specifically on defense, okay? Still, Ronald Jones projected a 2-year, $5 million contract, an average of $2.5 million a season. Pretty cheap, and he fits what the Chargers need to do. He's also only 24 years old, so he might offer some value in that department as well. Coming in at number 16, we've got Jermaine Ifedi, 27-year-old right guard for the Bears. if you guys been watching this channel for a while, you know about Germain Ifedi. I've talked about him before, right? He's one of those guys I've talked about the past couple of seasons because, you know, honestly, he's not that stellar name by any means, but he's very versatile. And again, that's a value that you have to take into account when signing a guy to, let's say, just a short or 1 or 2 year contract. He played guard and right tackle for the Chicago Bears. Again, maybe flying under the radar because the Bears offense kind of sucked the past couple of seasons, but I think in terms of what the Chargers are looking for, he fits it, right? He's a guy that I'd hope the Chargers target if we let a guy like Oday Abushi walk. And the reason for that is I think you could step in Germain Ifedi to the right guard position, which I think he actually graded out a lot better at right guard than right tackle. But if something were to happen to our right tackle, you know, in the middle of the season, Germain Ifedi could easily step in and fill that role as well. So to me, Germain Ifedi is a solid right guard and a decent backup right tackle if called upon. He's projected a 2-year, $10 million contract, an average of $5 million a season. Okay, so not the heaviest contract. And at worst, he's a very solid backup for the Chargers at right tackle. But again, I see him definitely as being a serviceable right guard to start with the Bolts this season. Next up at number 15 is Sony Michel, 26 years old, running back formerly of the Los Angeles Rams. Honestly, I was expecting to see Sony Michel a little bit higher on this list, right? With what I saw him do with the Los Angeles Rams this season, I expected him to be a very solid option to mix in there with Austin Eckler. The only thing is I think he averaged something like 3.2, 3.3 yards per carry, which is very low, but he does do what the Chargers need, right? In terms of a solid between the tackle running back too, Sony might be the best fit on this list, maybe even outside of like a Leonard Fournette, right? He's very good at what he does in between the tackles. What he lacks in receiving, he makes up with power. And again, we need that healthy mix with Austin Eckler. In relief of Darrell Henderson, Sony looked solid for the Rams. Mixing him in with Eckler could be exactly what the team needs. He'd be pretty good. I'm just not super stoked about the price. Again, I'm looking to save a little bit money elsewhere. He's projected a 2-year, $8 million contract, an average of $4 million a season. Not bad. If we decided to sign him, I'd be pretty excited. I want to get back to the days of Austin Eckler and Melvin Gordon, right? We saw Austin Eckler, some of his best ball was played when he had a solid, I would say, backup in Melvin Gordon, even though Melvin Gordon was technically the one back then. When they mixed those guys back and forth, we saw a very healthy run game, and that's what the Chargers lack right now. Sony Michel could definitely help us get back to that mold. Next up at number 14, we got Chase Edmonds, 25 years old. Oh, man, dudes. I was actually pretty shocked I put him this low on the list, but the reason he's not a top 10 option for me is because of 3 things, right? Money, injury, and scheme fit. Because Chase Edmonds is an awesome talent. I think he, 5.1 yards per carry? Absolutely insane, right? And I think if we were to sign him, he'd be exactly what Bolts fans were hoping to see when we mixed in Austin Eckler with Justin Jackson, right? Jackson wasn't a particularly great between the tackles guy, but he played really good zone running, right? When he got outside, he was very, very lethal when he found space, and Chase Edmonds would take that to the next level. The only thing, again, that I don't like, he's a bit smaller. He doesn't fit the mold of what I'm looking for, but he's very shifty. I think he's only like 5'9", too. So we'd have 2, pretty small running backs on the team, but still Chase Edmonds is such a good talent. You've got to put him on this list, right? We need a bigger back first and foremost, but if we decide to sign Chase Edmonds, it would be hard not to be excited. He's projected a 2-year, $12 million contract, an average of $6 million a season. Again, a bit pricey. He's got that recent injury. He doesn't fit what I'm looking for, but he's still a heck of a talent. Next up, speaking of a heck of a talent, what a season we saw for Cordarrelle Patterson, man. The ultimate gadget player in the NFL. We see this every few seasons, right? There's a guy that just blasts his way into the NFL. He's an everything kind of player, running back, wide receiver, throw him in at tight end if you have to. That was Cordarrelle Patterson this season, and he was a tricky name to add to this list for me. Yes, he saw a phenomenal season in 2021, but he's 30. It's hard to believe, right, with the kind of production we saw last season. He is 30 years old. Still, when you think about him added to the Chargers backfield, he's got the receiving skills, right? That pairs very well with Austin Eckler. You can run a lot of plays that you design for Austin Eckler with Cordarrelle Patterson back there as well. And he's also big. right? Former wide receiver, 6'2", I think, 6'3". I think he's still big enough to run in between the tackles too and do what the Chargers need of the running back too this season. It's hard not to love Patterson to the Chargers, okay? But his price and his age and honestly his fit as a running back too specifically might be a little bit hard to justify, but I could not exclude him from this list. He's projected a 2-year, $12 million contract, an average of $6 million a season. Next up at number 12, we got Riley Reiff, 33 years old, okay? And Reiff is a guy that we talked a lot about last offseason, okay? I was like, get this guy to the Chargers. We need a backup for Brian Bulaga. And guess what happened? Brian Bulaga went down, and Riley Reiff had a pretty solid season with the Cincinnati Bengals, now in the Super Bowl, right? And in terms of what the Chargers are looking for, I think we live in an era of the NFL where you got to look at backups almost as valuable as your starters, right? You got to get yourself some really decent backup talent because we're living in the era of COVID in the NFL. Anything could happen, especially if you got, a position as important as right tackle out there. You want to make sure the guy stepping into that role is ready to take the responsibility. Riley Reiff, to me, he'd be higher on this list if I viewed him maybe as more of a starting caliber right tackle, which I definitely think he could handle the load, but he's played both right tackle and left tackle for the Bengals and the Minnesota Vikings. So I see him as, let's say, a luxury swing tackle. I wouldn't feel super great about him rolling out as our starting right tackle, but I also wouldn't hate it, if that makes sense. At worst, he's a very quality swing tackle. He's projected at 2 years, $14 million contract, an average of $7 million a season. Again, it's a luxury having a swing tackle that good, but the Chargers have enough money to afford luxury signings. And if you're going to do something like this, I think a swing tackle has to be at the top of my list, okay? Next up at number 11, another running back on this list, we got James Conner. Man, did the Arizona Cardinals have some really good running backs this season. And James Conner exploded onto the scene with the Cardinals. Honestly, when he moved on from the Pittsburgh Steelers, I didn't have a lot of hope for the guy. The dude was riddled with injuries. He couldn't stay on the field. He looked great when he was on the field, but I think Pittsburgh has a bit of like a tendency to make running backs look better than they actually are. That wasn't the case with James Conner, luckily for him, right? He played in relief of Chase Edmonds when he got hurt earlier this season, and James Conner produced a career-high 18 touchdown. I mean, guys, if you're looking for a dude, it's first and goal, right? 2 yards from pay dirt. We haven't really had that guy other than maybe Justin Herbert on the quarterback sneak that we're like, here, just go score the touchdown. James Conner would be that guy, right? He didn't have the greatest yards per carry, but man, was he good at getting in the end zone. And he also offers very solid receiving skills as well. I was really shocked to see that stat. He looked really good in receiving, which again makes him fit perfectly in the Austin Eckler playbook, right? You swap him in and out. You can run a lot of the same plays. The difference is James Conner can also pound it in to the end zone and score you some points too. So I like James Conner a lot. My only concern with him is his injury history and his price, which again, I mean, he could have been number 5 on this list if it weren't for that. Still, his projected contract is 2 years, $12.8 million, an average of $6.4 million a season. Again, a bit pricier than what I'm looking for, but James Conner, it would be nice to score some touchdowns with your running back just straight up the middle, right? And I think Austin Eckler could use the help in that department. Next up at number 10, we got Austin Corbett. Hey, I know what you guys are thinking. Every single time we see a Los Angeles Ram on this list, we're like, oh yeah, director, he played with, Brandon Staley and saw some good success there. And yes, that is absolutely true with Austin Corbett here. I think he was actually traded from the Cleveland Browns shortly before playing for the Los Angeles Rams. And both times, he had a lot of potential. And I think he saw a lot of that potential lived up to with the Rams in 2020 and 2021. Great seasons for him there. And honestly, I think he's been improving drastically. I think very impressively over his time in the NFL, the last 2 seasons to be specific. And he might be considered a real steal for whoever decides to nab him in free agency this season. His development has been compared to another guy named Wyatt Teller, another very talented guard in the NFL for the Cleveland Browns. If he turns out anywhere like or near Wyatt Teller's talent and status, this would be one of the biggest steal signings of all time, right? He's a slightly better run blocker than he is a pass blocker, but he's definitely solid all around. He's projected a 4-year, $35 million contract. contract. I didn't write the average, but just a 535 by 4. Not a bad signing right there. He's likely only 26 years old. He's likely a guy that you sign if you just want to get that right guard, position solidified, no sweat, start him right away. Don't even worry about right guard for a long time. Next up, as we are moving into the top 10, at number 9, we've got Alex Collins. I'm going to catch some flack for this one. I always do. This is 100% a fanboy pick for me, all right? I love Alex Collins. I really do. I love his play style. Maybe I'm getting some beast mode vibes. We got the blinders on because, of course, he's got the visor. He's got the dreads. But to me, outside of that, he's the definition of a between-the-tackle bruiser kind of running back, and he would be insanely cheap. You guys remember the preseason game versus the Seattle Seahawks for us? Alex Collins absolutely destroyed us, and it was in that game. I liked him before that game, but it was in that game where I was like, yeah, man, I wouldn't mind him as our running back too. The dude is just such a perfect fit. He would offer what we're looking for. He didn't have the greatest stats. I'm not gonna lie to you guys and say he's the next big thing, at running back too, but he's someone that I personally like. He's one of the director's picks. He's on this list, and again, he'd be insanely cheap, low risk. He's someone that I would be excited to see in powder blue. He's a projected 1 year, $1 million contract. You guys willing to take the stab in the dark with me for $1 million? I sure am. Next up at number 8, and we're going from director's favorite to a fan favorite, general NFL fandom favorite player in the Ernest Johnson, right? 25 years old, the undrafted superstar from 2021. He stepped in lieu of the two, starting running backs that were injured for the Cleveland Browns and just made such a big impact for that team. And in my opinion, I think he has absolutely earned some more playing time. But I do have to mention this, okay? Because I'm sure a lot of people were thinking this as well. There is some skepticism revolving around his true value because he was running behind a very stout Cleveland Browns offensive line. You could throw, Todd Gurley behind that line. You could throw, other decently talented running backs behind that line. They would look like superstars in the NFL. But still, in terms of a backup running back, because I'm not looking at Ernest to be my starter. I'm looking at him to be the guy we mix in with Austin Eckler. I think he should provide exactly what the team is looking for. Okay, very patient runner, between the tackles kind of guy. I really liked what I saw from him, and I love the story. I love his stats, 5.3 yards per carry. He's an easy name to root for. I would be excited for Ernest making his way to Los Angeles this season. He's projected a 2-year, $5.2 million contract, an average of $2.6 million a season. Hey, you can't hate that, man. Decent number, not too expensive, and he's a great player and a great story to follow. Next up at number 7, we've got Morgan Moses, right tackle, formerly of Washington. He moved his way on to the Jets this last season. 31 years old, right? He's been around the league for a long time. And honestly, you take a look at this name, it's not a name that immediately screams elite, right? But one thing he does scream to me is consistency. Morgan Moses, he's missed a little bit of time in his career, but the last couple of seasons, he's missed very, very few snaps. And you know what? The best ability is availability. The Chargers fans and Chargers organization learned that the hard way with Brian Bulaga missing a majority of his career in Los Angeles. I think Morgan Moses is one of those guys that you can step into the right tackle position, feel really good. He's not going to have the ceiling of Bulaga, but he's going to be more available. And I think at this point, that's what the Chargers really need. You could argue that he's better than Bulaga in terms of, staying on the field because he's more available. And, although he's much better run blocker than he is a pass blocker, I think he's a great short-term filler. If you just need a body in there to, hope to stay on the field all season, help protect Justin Herbert's right side. So he's projected a 2-year, $15 million contract, an average of $7.5 million a season. Morgan Moses, I'd be pretty excited. He's number 7, right? It kind of shows how few right tackles there are available right now, but he'd be one of those guys that we signed that I'm like, okay, cool, we got that covered. Let's move into the draft. Next up at number 6, this is a big talent, guys. Honestly, I'm shocked that he wasn't top 5 for me, but I do think he's going to be a little bit more expensive than what his projected contract is showing me on PFF and Spot Rack and all these other places. Laken Tomlinson, right guard. Okay, and again, this is a situation or a scenario where the Chargers let Oday Ibushi walk, and we want that new guy in there, the new freshness, the new hotness that can hold down that position for a few seasons, at least a few seasons, right? Laken, to me, is one of the best names on this list in terms of reliability. He played solid throughout all 20 games in 2021 for the San Francisco 49ers. That's the regular season as well as the postseason. And he looked fantastic in every single one of those. You know, he grading out as a very solid pass protector. He's very good in the run as well. It's as good as it gets when it comes to right guard and free agency, in my opinion, right? Again, he would be higher on this list if I thought that his contract projection was going to be what it says, but I think it's going to be higher. He's projected a 3-year, $27 million contract, an average of $8 million a season. I think it's going to be a little higher, and I also think it's kind of a far stretch to think of the Niners letting him go. He's a very, very talented right guard. But hey, if he's available at that price point, totally Chargers, go get him. He'd be a fantastic ad for any team. Now at number 5, Dennis Kelly, the 6'8" beast. Now, you guys are the reason why Dennis Kelly is in my sights at all. You guys pointed to me that the Guilty as Charged podcast mentions their name a couple of times, specifically Tyler. I think if you guys haven't checked them out, Guilty as Charged is an awesome YouTube page they got going on over there. And you know what? Dennis Kelly, when I started looking into the name, he looks really solid, dude. 6'8", huge presence on the line. He graded out okay in run blocking, but very good in pass protection. I like it, man. Dennis Kelly, to me, how do I say this? He's exactly the type of move that I hope the team makes at right tackle. A short-term, very solid guy that can hold down the position and buy the Chargers some time to go find the guy of the future. It could be in the draft. It could be in the draft this season. And a big reason why Dennis Kelly is such a smart move is because let's say we do sign him, and we also decide to draft a guy in the first round. At worst, you got yourself a super cheap, very reliable, high-quality backup right tackle, maybe even a backup swing tackle. Dennis Kelly is a very strong name, and he also represents the other, under-the-radar right tackles that are short-term solutions that have very high grades in pass protection in me. Again, his contract should be relatively cheap. I looked at a projection of a 1-year, $2 million deal. I'm not sure if that's correct. I would expect it to be a little bit higher, but man, if it's $2 million for a starting caliber right tackle, sign me up. But I would expect it to be a little bit more expensive than that. Still, Dennis Kelly, fantastic option. He represents the kind of strategy I hope the Chargers use in finding a right tackle this season. Next up at number 4, we've got James Daniels, okay? Right guard, Chicago Bears, 24 years old. It is easy to overlook the Bears in free agency, okay, guys? I get it. The Bears' offense was absolutely horrid, and it causes guys like Daniels to fly under the radar a little bit. This is where I wet my chops a little bit. James Daniels, he's not the flashiest name, but he's been improving very quickly in his time in the NFL. Every single season, just getting a little bit better to the point where this last season, he looked really, really solid at the position of right guard. Okay, so solid, as a matter of fact, that I feel like whoever grabs him, again, a little bit like who was the last guy that we were talking about? Austin Corbett, right? In the same terms of like whoever grabs him might find themselves a really, really valuable piece that grows into a quality starter over the next couple of seasons. And again, he is only 24 years old, James Daniels. Grading, he graded above average as a run blocker, but he's a very decent pass blocker as well. He's great in the long term if the Chargers want to find an answer and a solution to right guard for that long. He's projected a 4-year, $29 million contract, an average of $7.3 million a season. So again, the projections say that people do notice his value and his growth, but at the same time, it could be a little bit cheaper than that. You never know. James Daniels, great player. One that I hope the Chargers do have on their list this season. Next up at number 3. Little shocked to see him not at number 1 on this list, but I'll show you guys why in just a second, is Trent Brown. Now, Trent Brown, Chargers fans know his name because the Oakland, or I should say the Vegas Raiders, I think it was the Oakland Raiders back then. The Raiders signed him from the Patriots, and he stunk. I don't know if it was Joey Bosa out there exposing him. It was definitely the injury. I think he only played like 5 games that season. But in his time with the Raiders, he did not look so good. He goes back to the New England Patriots, and he looks like one of the best right tackles in the league. And I know what you're thinking, though, dudes. He's too injury prone, right? And you would be right. He missed 8 games in 2021. But the biggest thing that makes me optimistic about Trent Brown is that he finished really strong, right? Weeks 10 through 18, even that playoff game you can tack on there, he looked really, really good, which might tell me that he left that injury behind him. He finally put it behind him, right? He's ready to be more consistent. He's 6'8". He's a monster. He ended the year with an 81.2 pass blocking grade. I mean, if I'm looking for a guy to go out there and protect Herbert's right side, it's Trent Brown. But he does come with some risk. That is why he is not number one. The injury history was enough for me to lower him on this list a little bit. But I do think in terms of what he provides, he would be worth a signing even with that risk. I couldn't put him at number one because I don't want to relive the Brian Bulaga nightmare, right? It's like, oh, this guy is great, but he's just never on the field. If we can cross our fingers and hope that he's on the field, the Chargers have, without a doubt, one of the best offensive lines in football if they do decide to grab Trent Brown. Only 28 years old. All right, guys, at number 2, again, this is a name... I always do this, right? It's just like, hey, man, you're kind of, following the script here. You can come to expect some of these big names at number 1 and 2, but I did it again, man. Number 2, I got Darrell Williams. Chargers fans, everybody's like, what? Darrell Williams? Let me explain, okay? Let me make a case for Darrell Williams here, okay? Maybe he's not the number 2 player for every NFL team out there, but for the Chargers, I could argue he's one of those names that you really have to pay attention to this offseason. Because Williams may fly under the radar, but that's exactly the type of running back that I'm targeting for the Bolts this season. Okay, remember all that stuff we talked about running back too? We need a bruiser between the tackle guy. Well, Darrell Williams, 6 foot, 224 pounds. This is precisely the archetype of running back that we are looking for. And Chargers fans, I would say other teams that he's played too, we know for certain how good this guy can be, serving the power back role for his team. Short yardage between the tackles. I feel really confident in a guy like Darrell Williams being a fit for what the Chargers need right now. Because let's be honest, dudes, it would be awesome to sign James Conner. It would be awesome to sign Cordarrelle Patterson. Be exciting to, leave in Leonard Fournette. But what that does is push, Eckler's role down the list a little bit. And I don't want Eckler's, touches. I don't want Eckler's production to be hindered by any signing this offseason. Eckler is our number 1 running back, and he is one of the best in the league. That's been proven. He got snubbed from the Pro Bowl this season. What a signing like Darrell Williams says is, hey, Eckler is still our number 1 running back, but we're going to provide him help where he needs it and where the team needs it. Between the tackles, short yardage, scoring touchdowns on the goal line. That is why Darrell Williams is number 2 on this list for me for the Chargers. He fits exactly what we need, and he is stupid cheap. Projected contract of 3 years, $6 million, an average of $2 million a season. You know what? Pat on the back for the director. I think there's some insight there that carries a lot of what the Chargers should be looking to do as far as team building in 2022. Darrell Williams is one of those guys at the top of my list. At number 1, we got another Williams. At number 1, I would say the offensive line takes priority over the halfback position this season. Am I wrong? At number 1, we do have an offensive lineman in Connor Williams. He's a guard for the Dallas Cowboys, right? And he was brought up, again, the legendary Dallas Cowboys offensive line system. It feels like everybody that plays for the Cowboys goes on to have a pretty good career elsewhere if they decide to move on, right? And that's the system that Connor Williams was brought up in. He's graded better and better since being drafted, and he's 24 years old. He's not done improving. He just keeps raising the bar for himself. I was kind of skeptical as whether or not to put him at number 1 on this list because when you really look at it, he's playing between Zach Martin and Tyron Smith, right? Maybe that skews what his actual production is. But when I looked at him individually, he's great. He's awesome. Impressive grades in run and pass blocking. He's a solid fit, not just for the Chargers, but for any team. And he wouldn't be, in terms of average salary, that expensive either. He's one of those guys that would offer a long-term solution to guard while not impacting the cap too severely. He's projected a 3-year, $20 million contract, an average of $6.67 million a season. I think, honestly, whoever gets Connor Williams is going to be very, very happy for very many seasons. He's one of those guys that I don't think the Cowboys are going to let him go, but if he's available, go after him, Chargers. He's definitely one of those long-term solutions for me. So bottom line, what would I do? I do this at the end of every one of these videos. What would I do with the cap space the Chargers have, $60, $70 million, the kind of needs that we see on this team? I am focusing my cap space on defense this season. I think you guys know that. I think a lot of people agree with that. And in terms of running back and offensive line, right tackle is definitely the most important position to me to nail with any sort of your cap space in 2022 in the offseason. What I would do is go for the under-the-radar guys here, right? Free up money for your defense. Maybe grab one big name like Trent Brown, right? Trent Brown, that right tackle position is so important. That's huge. Maybe that's where you take, one big money, big spending kind of guy there. Maybe even more of a Morgan Moses. He'd be cheaper. Morgan Moses, he would be cheaper, and honestly, his injury history isn't as scary as a guy like Trent Brown, but still, if I spend up on any of these positions, it's going to be right tackle. But I do think the Chargers can find a great right tackle in the draft this season too, so you kind of mix that in with a couple of different factors. I think signing a guy like Dennis Kelly makes a lot of sense for the Chargers. I think signing a guy like Darrell Williams makes a lot of sense for the Chargers, and maybe even a Jermaine Ifedi, right? I think those three guys is who I would target if I was in charge of the Chargers books, right? It would cost the Chargers maybe $5 million in 2022 to get these guys added to the roster. And if the Chargers find, let's say they do find the right tackle of the future in the draft, then all of a sudden you got a guy like Dennis Kelly, as a solid depth option. He could even serve as a swing tackle, and even Ifedi, right? Ifedi could be your right guard, and then you got some solid backups too. Just guys, the depth at offensive line is going to be so important this next upcoming season, okay? If you can add a couple of pieces on the cheap that could be potential starters / really good backups, you do it, okay? Because every single season, you're going to see somebody go down on that line, and unless you got a solid quality backup, you're going to suffer. You're only as strong as your weakest link. That's why I like guys like this, because I am targeting a right tackle in the draft. But worst case scenario, you got $2 million on the books for a guys like Dennis Kelly, and if something were to happen, I feel very confident in him stepping in, okay? If you want a more proven name, I guess you could swap Kelly out with like a Morgan Moses, and the cap would still look pretty good, maybe about $7 million just on those positions, but that's what I would do. Dennis Kelly, guy like Darrell Williams, Jermaine Ifedi, you just find some ways to save money, but while not sacrificing quality, and have I think it's even more important that you have a long-term game plan with free agency and the draft when it comes to these specific positions. So you guys let me know in the comment section below what you think of my madness. Do you guys like some of the strategies I'm trying to implement here with these positions, or would you rather really go all in and get the best guy, Trent Williams? I don't care if he's got an injury history. We need a guy to protect Justin Herbert's right side, and maybe use that draft pick for Jordan Davis when the day comes, right? You guys let me know. I don't know if there's really a wrong answer as far as opinions, but you guys let me know what your thoughts are too. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. If you did enjoy this content, hit us up with the like and sub on your way out. This has been The Director. We'll see you next time, and as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Darrell Williams, number 2. I'm crazy.